Picture this. You're walking along the Athenian coast, the Aegean stretching out before you, and you stumble upon stones whispering tales of ancient rituals. We're talking about the Sanctuary of Brauron, a place that was once central to a truly unique practice.
What's fascinating here is that Brauron isn't just another set of old ruins. It provides us with a remarkably clear window into a specific and really compelling ritual from the ancient Greek world, the arkteia.
Exactly. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where today we're plunging headfirst into this intriguing rite of passage for young Athenian girls dedicated to Artemis Brauronia, a coming-of-age story involving bears. I mean, how cool is that?
It's pretty unique.
So our mission today is to unpack this tradition, try and understand what it reveals about the lives of young women in ancient Athens, their whole journey to adulthood.
Right. And we've got a fair bit to work with.
We do. We've got a rich collection of clues to guide us, literary mentions, archaeological discoveries, even inscriptions offering these, tantalizing glimpses.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we're really seeking to understand is how ancient Athenian society shaped its young women, the values it emphasized, and the crucial role that religious ritual played in that whole formative process.
Huh.
Brauron, in the sense, it acts as a powerful microcosm, really, of Athenian societal structures and beliefs.
Okay, let's start then by focusing on the central figure, the guiding goddess herself,
Oh,
Artemis Brauronia. Now, Artemis, as we generally understand her, she's this formidable, independent presence, right?
Oh.
A virgin goddess, mistress of animals, roaming free.
the wild huntress, exactly.
But in her Brauroning aspect, she adopts this seemingly contrasting role, protector of young women and childbirth. It almost feels like we're encountering a different facet of the same powerful deity, doesn't it?
That apparent duality is absolutely key to understanding her function at Brauron. Significantly, her sanctuaries were often situated in what we call liminal spaces. Think forests, mountains, coastlines, places that exist sort of on the threshold between different environments.
Okay.
And Brauron, with its coastal location somewhat removed from the urban center of Athens, fits this pattern perfectly. These in-between places are symbolically potent settings for rites of passage, marking that crucial transition from one stage of life to another.
And the name Brauronia itself, that just directly links her to the sanctuary's location. Right?
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward there.
Precisely. It's the epiteto, the descriptive title, that firmly anchors her to this specific sacred landscape. But her responsibilities extend beyond just the place. At Brauron, Artemis is particularly revered as a krokotos, a nurturer of children.
Trophos,
Yeah.
nurturer of children.
Yes. And the sheer abundance of terracotta figurines of young boys and girls unearthed at the site strongly emphasizes this nurturing role.
You can almost picture the parents bringing these little clay figures, maybe as expressions of gratitude for a child's health or perhaps prayers for their well-being.
Exactly. It really brings that personal connection between the worshippers and the goddess into sharp focus.
And Artemis Brauronia's care didn't end with early childhood, did it? She was also the primary divine figure for those, monumental female life transitions.
Right. From being a Parthenos, a young girl.
To a nymph, someone of marriageable age, and ultimately to a gyne, a wife and mother. She even provided protection during the perils of childbirth.
And this is where the textile dedications become so telling. Inscriptions document numerous textiles offered to the goddess, very likely by women expressing their thanks for successful deliveries. And interestingly, clothing from women who died in childbirth appears to have been dedicated to Iphigenia, a figure closely associated with Brauron, as we'll explore in more detail later.
Right, so the clothing itself being so intimately connected to the person.
It becomes a powerful and tangible symbol of that significant life passage.
It's like a physical manifestation of their experience offered up to the divine. But let's circle back to that seemingly contradictory aspect, Artemis the Virgin overseeing fertility. How does that dynamic actually work?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Her virginity wasn't a rejection of marriage or childbirth for her female devotees. Not at all.
Right.
Instead, it uniquely positioned her as a powerful guardian for young women standing on the threshold of entering those very states. Her own purity and independence made her an ideal protector for those transitioning into new roles that involved sexuality and motherhood.
So she guides them towards these experiences.
Precisely, ensuring a safe and divinely sanctioned passage.
So it's not about her being opposed to marriage, but rather about her serving as the ultimate guide through that pivotal doorway. Fascinating.
Exactly.
And this wasn't just a personal matter for these young women and their families, was it? The cult of Artemis Brauronia held significant civic importance for Athens itself.
Absolutely. By safeguarding the well-being of future mothers and ensuring the safety of births, the cult directly contributed to the continuity and prosperity of the polis, the city-state.
Makes sense.
And the evidence for this state importance is pretty compelling. There was a solemn procession from Athens all the way to the sanctuary for the Brauronia festival, and crucially, the existence of a related sanctuary, the Brauronian, right on the Acropolis in Athens.
Wow, on the Acropolis itself.
Yes, which tells you this wasn't just some minor local cult. This was state-endorsed. It shows how deeply intertwined her roles protecting girls, overseeing transitions, safeguarding births were with the health and future of Athens.
So deeply embedded within the religious framework of Athens. Okay, we've established the goddess and her crucial role. Now, let's set the scene. Tell us about the Sanctuary of Brauron itself. Where was it? What did it look like?
Well, the sanctuary saw its main period of cultic activity from roughly the 8th to the 3rd centuries BCE, and its location appears to have held sacred significance even before the construction of formal structures. There's a natural spring and a nearby cave.
Classic features for early sacred spots.
Exactly, likely early focal points of veneration. Then the archaic Temple of Artemis was built on a terrace nestled between these natural elements. You can almost imagine those early worshippers drawn to the life-giving water and the mystery of the cave.
And then over time, this more formal sanctuary complex grew around it. What kind of archaeological evidence do we have from the main period of the cult's use?
The site really flourished, particularly in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE. We have the remnants of the archaic temple and then a later, more substantial Doric temple. This was likely rebuilt after the Persian Wars, maybe around 480 BCE.
A major rebuilding effort.
Yes, and there's also a very distinctive H-shaped stoa, a colonnaded portico that defined a large open courtyard, and even a stone bridge spanning the Erysinos River, which would have facilitated access.
Quite a developed complex. And you mentioned rebuilding, maybe around 420 BCE. During the Peloponnesian War and the plague.
That's a possibility scholars discuss. That timing during such a tumultuous period might reflect a civic effort to revitalize cults associated with healing and fertility, maybe seeking divine help during a profound crisis.
That makes a lot of sense, turning to the gods for solace and renewal during exceptionally difficult times. And what about the smaller, more personal finds? What insights can they offer us?
Oh, the votive offerings discovered at Brauron are incredibly insightful. We have the krokotos.
Those little pots we mentioned.
Yes, those small and distinctive ceramic vessels often adorned with scenes of girls running or dancing. Crucially, some of these krokotos contain ash residue.
Ash. So they were used in rituals.
It certainly suggests their use in rituals near the altar, perhaps for burning incense or pouring libations. These vessels are absolutely key to our understanding of the arkteia.
So these little pots weren't just decorative objects. They were active participants in the ritual practices. And you mentioned the stoa, this ash-shaped building. There's a compelling theory about its purpose in relation to the arteia, isn't there?
Yes. The excavator of the site, Papadimitriou, he proposed that the rooms opening onto the courtyard might have served as a Parthenon, literally, a house of the maidens, where the young arktoi actually resided during their period of service to Artemis.
Wow, like dormitories.
Sort of, if they were temporarily housed there, set apart from their families. That would significantly amplify the liminal, transitional nature of the entire ritual experience.
A temporary separation, a dedicated physical space for this transformative period. It adds another layer to the concept of them being in this sort of in-between state. What other types of objects have been found at Brauron?
Well, we've unearthed numerous terracotta figurines of children, likely offered as thanks to Artemis for her protection. Then there's a collection of personal items and toiletry articles, jewelry like gold and bronze rings, bronze mirrors, cosmetic boxes.
Everyday items.
Exactly. And even epinatra, those distinctive wool-working knee protectors, offering us glimpses into the lives of those who dedicated them. And perhaps most significantly, although they rarely survive archaeologically, inscriptions tell us about the vast number of textile dedications made to the goddess.
Right, the clothing again.
We even have one surviving inscription where a mother explicitly thanks Artemis for the safe delivery of twins, which really highlights the personal significance of these dedications.
So a real blend of public ritual and private devotion evident at Brauron. Okay, now for the really intriguing part. The arktoi themselves.
No.
Who are these little bears?
The arktoi, literally translating to bear cubs, or little bears, were young Athenian girls who, at some point before they married, entered a specific period of service dedicated to Artemis.
A kind of sacred duty.
Yes, this service involved playing the bear, the act of arktoi, and it was considered a fundamental rite of passage in their young lives.
And this is where the historical picture becomes a bit less clear, right? Our ancient sources don't all agree on the precise age of these arktoi.
That's correct. It's a point of debate. Some sources, like a commentary, a scholion on Aristophanes' comedy Lysistrata, and entries in later Byzantine encyclopedias like the Suda and Harpocratium, seem to suggest an age range of around 5 to 10 years old.
5 to 10, so quite young.
Potentially. This interpretation often stems from linking the term for completing 10 years of age with the phrase used for serving as a bear. However, the Lysistrata itself, where a chorus member recounts her youthful religious duties, well, that seems to imply participation at an older age.
Okay.
So other scholarly interpretations point to a range of maybe 10 to 14 years old.
That's a fairly significant difference in age. How does this variation impact our understanding of the ritual's purpose?
It subtly shifts the emphasis, you know.
Ah.
If the girls were primarily prepubescent, say 5 to 10, the preparation for marriage aspect would likely be more symbolic, focused on long-term socialization and learning appropriate feminine roles.
More about general upbringing.
Right. But if they were in their early teens, 10 to 14, the connection to impending marriage and motherhood would be much more direct, perhaps addressing the physical and emotional changes of puberty.
Closer to the actual transition.
Exactly. And the ambiguity in the sources might even reflect changes in the ritual over time, or perhaps different age groups participated in different parts of the larger Brauronia festival. It's one of the big questions. Just how young were these little bears?
That's a good point. Rituals aren't static. They can evolve over centuries. Another major question is the social origin of these arktoi. Was this a practice that involved all Athenian girls, or was it more restricted to, say, the elite?
Another good debate. There are reasoned arguments on both sides. Some scholars propose that initially participation might have been more widespread.
Open to everyone.
Perhaps. However, as the Brauronia festival grew in prominence, especially by the late 5th century BCE, participation in the arktoi might have become more restricted to the daughters of wealthier and more influential families.
Why the change?
Well, the scholar Christiane Servanu-Inwood, for example, she raised logistical concerns. Could all Athenian girls realistically participate in such an intensive ritual at one main sanctuary?
Practical point.
Plus, certain interpretations of that Lysistrata passage have been used to suggest an elite status for the participants.
So maybe it became a prestigious role, a way for certain families to publicly demonstrate their piety and social standing. But then, as you mentioned earlier, the sheer number and varying quality of the kretoriskoi that seems to suggest broader participation.
Exactly. That's the counter-argument. The large quantity of these ceramic vessels and the fact that they aren't all, frankly, masterpieces of pottery has led some scholars to argue that the arkteia wasn't exclusively elite.
So maybe girls from the general population participated too.
It seems likely yes, at least at certain times, or perhaps in less prominent sanctuaries dedicated to Artemis elsewhere in Attica. If participation was universal, it would have been a powerful way to instill shared values across the future female citizens. If it was more exclusive, it still served a civic function, but maybe also reinforced social hierarchies.
Okay, so we have this image of young girls, their precise age and social standing still debated, serving Artemis as arktoi. And this service took place within the context of the larger Brauronia festival.
Yes, the arktoi was a central and integral component of the larger Brauronia festival. This was a major religious event held every 4 years, or more accurately, every 5th year, using inclusive counting, the Pentateuch cycle.
A big deal on the religious calendar.
Definitely. Regarding the duration of the arktoi service itself, that remains another point of uncertainty. Servanu-Inwood proposed a year-long period, considering it ritually more probable, but concrete evidence for that specific time frame is lacking.
So maybe shorter, maybe longer.
We just don't know for sure. What seems reasonably clear is that their time spent at Brauron involved a separation from their usual daily lives and an immersion in the sacred space dedicated to Artemis.
Right. So with this image of the sanctuary and its offerings in mind, let's turn our attention to the central figures of this ritual, the arktoi themselves. Okay, so they're at Brauron, these little bears. What exactly did they do? What did playing the bear actually involve?
Well, the very core of the ritual was indeed playing the bear. The act of arktoi somehow embodying this animal that was so sacred to Artemis.
And the bear itself. It's a powerful symbol.
Incredibly rich, it represents wildness, untamed nature, but also powerful maternal instincts, the fierce protection of young cubs, and the bearer's cycle of hibernation and reemergence.
Transformation.
Exactly. A potent natural analogy for transformation and the cyclical nature of life. By emulating the bear, the young girls weren't just paying tribute, they were symbolically taking on and moving through qualities associated with this powerful animal maternal protectiveness, capacity for change.
It's more than just dressing up in a costume, then. It's about actively embodying those symbolic characteristics. And they had a specific garment for this ritual, didn't they? That distinctive saffron-colored tunic.
Yes, the krokotos, a distinctive saffron or yellow tunic. The color itself was likely deeply symbolic. Yellow could have evoked the color of a bear's fur.
Makes sense.
And saffron also held nuptial and transitional connotations in other Greek religious contexts, which strengthens the symbolic link to preparation for marriage.
So a color loaded with meaning.
Yes. Cyrano Wood even proposed a ritual removal of the krokotos at some point during the service, viewing it as a kind of graduation ceremony, marking the completion of their time as arktoi. This specific garment served as a visible marker of their transitional status.
A uniform of liminality.
Exactly, signaling their temporary detachment from regular societal roles.
So putting on the krokotos marked their entry into this arktoi phase, and taking it off signified their exit, their readiness for the next stage. And what about the activities they engaged in while wearing these tunics? What do the depictions on the krokotos and the limited literary references tell us?
We see depictions of running, often near an altar or a palm tree, a tree associated with the birth of Artemis, interestingly.
Running. Energetic.
Very. And intriguingly, some of these running figures are portrayed nude.
Nude. Really? Given their age.
Right. In Greek initiatory contexts, ritual nudity, especially for young participants, was generally not intended to be erotic. Instead, it likely symbolized a liminal state being on the threshold premarital purity, vulnerability before the sacred, maybe a symbolic stripping away of a former identity before assuming a new one.
Okay. So it's about that in-between space, being receptive to transformation.
Precisely. Not about being scandalous, but about being in this raw transitional state, open to change. And running seems like a powerful way to physically express that youthful energy, perhaps a shedding of the past.
What other kinds of activities did they participate in?
Choral dances performed around altars were also a common motif depicted on the kratariskoi. These communal dances were incredibly important for instilling a sense of group cohesion, discipline, and for expressing religious devotion through movement and song.
Group activity, shared experience.
Definitely. We also see depictions of processions with girls carrying sacred baskets, kinephoroi, garlands of flowers, or lit torches.
Torches. That implies nighttime rituals.
It certainly suggests that possibility, which would have added an element of mystery and solemnity to the experience, adds a whole other layer of atmosphere.
It really does. And it likely wasn't all just symbolic actions, was it? There were probably more traditional religious practices involved as well.
Absolutely. Sacrifices very likely involving goats, which were often associated with Artemis and communal banquets where the participants shared food and drink, were also probably integral parts of the larger Brauronia festival.
Feasting and sacrifice, standard parts of Greek worship.
Right. Further strengthening the bonds between the young participants and their connection to the divine. The combination of all these activities, running, dancing, processions, shared meals, suggests a really carefully structured ritual curriculum designed to shape these young women physically, socially, and spiritually for their future roles.
So a truly comprehensive and multifaceted experience. We've explored what the arktoi did. Now let's delve into the crucial question of why. What are the main scholarly theories regarding the meaning and underlying purpose of the arkteia ritual?
Okay, the academic debate on the meaning of the arkteia largely boils down to two primary interpretations. Was it fundamentally a rite of passage marking a significant life stage, or was it primarily an act of expiation, a way to atone for some perceived wrong?
Right, passage versus paying a debt, almost. Okay, let's first consider the rite of passage interpretation. What are the core arguments supporting this view?
Well, the traditional perspective views the arkteia as neatly fitting the classic three-stage structure of a rite of passage, first outlined by the anthropologist Arnold van Gennep.
Separation, liminality, reintegration.
Yeah, exactly. Separation. The girls leave home for Brauron, liminality, their time as arktoi, doing the rituals in that transitional state, and reintegration. Their return to society, now ready for marriage and adult roles.
Makes sense structurally.
The underlying idea here is that this ritual process helped prepare them for puberty, marriage, motherhood, effectively domesticating their perceived wild, youthful nature and guiding their energies towards socially accepted roles within the polis.
So it's understood as a structured process to guide them through that pivotal transition using ritual and symbolism. Now, let's turn to the expiation theory. Where does this interpretation originate?
This interpretation draws its strength from the etiological myths, the origin stories associated with the arkteia in ancient sources.
The why it started stories.
Right. The most common one recounts an incident where Athenians at Brauron killed a sacred bear belonging to Artemis. This naturally provoked the goddess's wrath, resulting in a plague or famine.
Oops. Bad move.
Very bad move. And the only way to appease the angered goddess, according to this myth, was for young Athenian girls to symbolically act as bears in her service before they could marry.
So a required service to make amends.
Essentially. Another related myth connects the arkteia to Iphigenia, suggesting a bear was miraculously sacrificed in her place at Brauron, linking the ritual to themes of substitution and divine favor. From this perspective, the main function wasn't the girl's personal development, but a communal act of atonement, ensuring Artemis's continued benevolence towards Athens.
So it's less about individual growth and more about a collective act of seeking forgiveness for a past offense.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like these two interpretations, right, of passage and expiation are fundamentally at odds.
That's precisely where much of the scholarly debate has centered. Some researchers, like John Brauron, have argued that appeasement should be considered the primary underlying function. Others, most notably Servinuin Wood, tried to integrate these aspects, though her specific theories have faced some criticism.
So still debated.
Very much so. However, it's increasingly being recognized that these two interpretations might not necessarily be mutually exclusive.
How so? Could both explanations have held validity at the same time in the ancient world?
It's quite plausible. Think about it. In ancient Greek religious thought, ensuring a smooth transition through life stages was often believed to be intrinsically linked to maintaining a good relationship with the gods.
Right, you don't want to anger them.
Exactly. So a foundational offense against a powerful goddess like Artemis killing her sacred bear could have been seen as potentially hindering those crucial life transitions for young women. Therefore, the arkteia might have originated as a necessary rite of passage precisely because of the need for communal expiation.
Ah, I see. The appeasement makes the passage possible or safe.
Precisely. The ongoing service of the arktoi could then be understood as a continuous act of appeasement, constantly ensuring Artemis's continued favor and protection for these vital female life stages. The expiation creates the necessary sacred conditions for the rite of passage to work.
That makes a great deal of sense. The intriguing idea that a foundational act of atonement could have actually paved the way for a beneficial rite of passage. It really highlights the deep interconnectedness of myth, ritual, and seeking divine favor.
It does. And it also serves as a potent reminder of how much of our understanding is based on piecing together fragmented evidence and interpreting it through our own modern scholarly lenses.
We ought to be careful not to impose our own categories too rigidly.
Absolutely. The often fragmentary nature of our surviving sources, the evocative visual clues from the Krokotos, the elusive literary references, the later origin myths, means our interpretations will always remain somewhat provisional. But the absence of a single definitive answer doesn't diminish the value of exploring these diverse perspectives.
Absolutely not. Now, we've mentioned her name a couple of times. Let's delve more deeply into the significant figure of Iphigenia and her enduring connection to the cult of Artemis at Brauron. She seems to play a remarkably important role there.
Indeed, Iphigenia's presence at Brauron adds another fascinating and complex layer. As you said, we all likely know the basic myth of her near sacrifice at Aulis, but the specific version connecting her to Brauron, particularly from Euripides' tragedy, Iphigenia among the Taurians, is crucial here.
Right. Remind us of that crucial connection. What happens after Aulis that links her to Brauron?
Okay, so in Euripides' telling, Artemis intervenes, doesn't let Iphigenia die. Instead, she substitutes a deer, or in some Brauron-specific myths, maybe a bear, and whisks Iphigenia away to Taurus in the Crimea.
Far away.
Very. There, Iphigenia becomes Artemis's priestess. Later, with her brother Orestes' help, she escapes, bringing a sacred statue of Artemis back with her. Upon their return to Greece, the goddess Athena herself instructs them that Iphigenia's destiny is to become Artemis's priestess at Brauron.
At Brauron specifically.
Yes, it's there she's destined to live out her days, eventually be buried, and receive cult honors, including, significantly, the dedication of clothing from women who tragically died in childbirth.
That's a really specific and intriguing division of labor, isn't it? Artemis gets the thanks for successful births. Iphigenia receives the memorials for the tragic outcomes.
That's a very insightful way to put it. It effectively allows the main cult of Artemis to focus on protection, success, new life, while simultaneously acknowledging and ritually managing the dangers of childbirth through Iphigenia's veneration.
A way to handle both sides of the experience. And there's some archaeological evidence, potentially.
Yes, there are ancient mentions of a possible cenotaph, a symbolic tomb for Iphigenia at Brauron. The original excavator, Papademetrio, even tentatively identified a structure as her tomb, though definitive proof is elusive.
So suggestive, but not certain.
Exactly, and her precise theological relationship with Artemis there is debated. Was she a deified mortal, a heroine elevated after her ordeal, or perhaps an older, local deity absorbed into Artemis's cult?
Like syncretism.
Right. That second possibility fits a common pattern where older local deities were integrated into the Olympian system, maybe as heroes or priests. Pausanias even mentions a tradition from Hesiod where Artemis transforms Iphigenia into the goddess Hecate.
Hecate, another powerful liminal figure.
Yes, often linked with Artemis. If Iphigenia had prior significance at Brauron, making her Artemis's priestess would be a way to maintain older traditions within the dominant Olympian framework.
So Iphigenia's complex story is deeply woven into the fabric of Brauron, adding layers of sacrifice, divine intervention, and the complexities of female life. And her association with the bear myth there just strengthens the connection.
Exactly. It all comes together, reinforcing the unique character of the cult at Brauron.
Okay, so we have these young bears doing these unique rituals with Artemis watching over and Iphigenia in the background. Let's delve a bit deeper into what that central bear symbolism truly meant for their journey to adulthood.
Well, the symbol of the bear, arkteos, is incredibly rich. It powerfully represents childhood, virginity, a perceived wild or pre-socialized state, and that direct connection to Artemis's own wild nature.
The untamed aspect.
Right. The arkteia can therefore be understood as a process of symbolic domestication, but importantly, not eradication of this wildness. It's more about channeling that youthful energy towards socially valued roles.
So the wildness isn't necessarily bad.
Not inherently negative, no. More like raw potential that needs cultural shaping and guidance.
So it's not about breaking a wild animal, but skillfully guiding a natural energy towards a specific purpose within society. And Artemis, as both wild goddess and nurturing protector, is the perfect mediator for this.
Precisely. She acts as that crucial intermediary between the untamed natural world and the ordered realm of civilized society. Successfully completing the arkteia signified a girl's readiness for marriage and adult responsibilities.
A signal to the community.
Yes. It was fulfilling a religious duty and meeting a social expectation. This reinforced societal norms and values, highlighting the ritual's role in both individual and collective transitions. It wasn't just about the girl, it was about her future place in the Athenian community.
It's truly fascinating how this ritual acted as a tangible bridge, connecting individual development with prescribed roles in civic and religious life. And the arkteia wasn't an isolated event, was it? It was part of that much larger festival.
Absolutely. The arkteia was deeply embedded within the significant Brauronia festival, that major religious event held every 4 years, underscoring its crucial role in the city's religious and social calendar.
Describe that broader festival for us. What else was happening besides the arktoi rituals?
A key element was that solemn procession we mentioned, traveling from Athens to Brauron. This wasn't just a walk, it was a powerful symbolic act connecting the city center with the rural sanctuary, affirming the importance of the cult and these female rites to the whole polis.
Visibly linking city and sanctuary.
Exactly. Beyond that, the festival likely involved broader community participation, musical performances, maybe athletic competitions, communal banquets, perhaps even horse races. It was a significant civic celebration centered around Artemis Brauronia.
So the whole community was actively involved in acknowledging and celebrating this transition. And the existence of the Brauronian sanctuary on the Acropolis itself really highlights the state's investment in all this.
It really does. The very existence of that affiliated sanctuary right in the religious and political heart of Athens speaks volumes about the state's high regard for Artemis Brauronia's functions, protecting girls, overseeing transitions, safeguarding births, ensuring fertility and citizenship.
It's quite unique, isn't it? A rural cult having such prominence on the Acropolis.
Some scholars argue exactly that it's unusual for a cult originating outside the city center to maintain such a high-profile, state-sanctioned presence there. The arkteia and the broader cult were undeniably integral to the religious infrastructure of Athens.
It really underscores that this wasn't just a local custom, but a state-sanctioned process with significant implications for the whole community. So, bringing all these fascinating threads together, what are the key insights we should take away from this deep dive into the arkteia?
Well, I think the arkteia was clearly a vital, dynamic mechanism for the socialization and maturation of young Athenian women. It played a crucial role in preparing them for their essential future roles as wives and mothers within Athenian society.
And it offers us a remarkably clear lens through which to understand ancient Athenian ideas about femininity, gender roles, and the fundamental importance they placed on reproduction, all powerfully symbolized by that evocative journey from bear to wife.
Precisely. And while our understanding is inevitably limited by the fragmented evidence, what Brauron reveals about a society that actively invested in the formation of its young women is incredibly rich.
They weren't just passive participants.
Not at all. These little bears were actively acquiring ritual agency, developing a collective identity, becoming future contributors to their families, lineages, and Athens itself. The public recognition placed on this stage of their lives, even as their primary sphere would be domestic, highlights its societal importance. Brauron, in a very real sense, functioned as a kind of cradle of future citizens.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about the parallels and contrast with modern rites of passage or the societal expectations placed on young women today. What modern-day bear might symbolically represent their unique journey to adulthood now? A truly fascinating question to ponder. Thanks so much for exploring this with us.